Hello guys, this is Swami once again, and as we did in the past, we talked about three modules of learning. We are going to do this again. We're going to talk about three more modules this time. So the first one that we're going to talk about is in terms of marketing and the customer relationship management. That's one very important aspect. The second module that we are going to talk about is in terms of the strategic management for innovative businesses. What are the kind of strategic decisions that you have to make, and how do you measure them in terms of growth opportunities? The third one is again the entrepreneurship thing that we are going to cover. How exactly the new entrepreneurs they are different from the strategy that we used to have in the past. So now to come directly into marketing and the customer relationship management, why exactly is this important? So we all understand that marketing management is a very essential and exciting opportunity that builds a kind of connect with your customer. And once you're able to establish the relationship, definitely there are four P's of marketing that come into picture: the product itself, the price, the promotion, and the place. And all these four P's ideally make a lot of difference in terms of how exactly do you approach your customer and what kind of relationship you build with them. And it's all about the customer relationship management that basically drives your opportunities and the kind of growth. We all understand that basically the customer needs means growth opportunities. So if you're able to satisfy the needs of the customer, basically there is always a growth opportunity, and then you can tap into it. Now, how do you do that? Now, market-oriented organizations basically what do they do? They sense and respond instead of trying to make and sell. So that's the older strategy where you just used to produce goods and then go out and sell. Now that has changed a lot because there's a huge amount of competition over there. So you have to sense your customer needs and then you have to respond to that. That's very key aspect of it. Now, the customer oriented, the competition oriented, and they are focused on coordinating activities. These are very three important factors when you talk about relationship management in terms of the customers. Now, how do you do that? The first important aspect of it is the market segmentation. So basically, you have to survey your customers. You survey your customers, you profile them, you understand your consumers, you analyze the survey data, and then you profile your consumers to understand which all customers are kind of suited to your needs. So there we go by the 80-20% rule. We all understand 20% of your customers they drive the 80% of the profitability. So there's always a sense of how do you approach these customers, and how do you actually ensure that the 80 to 20% rule helps you drive in growth opportunities. Now, the aftermarket strategy that comes into picture over there are three C's over there which are very important: the customer, the company, and the competition itself. So you basically try to understand the customer, you try to understand your company profile, and then you try to see what is your competition over there, because that's how do you do an upselling. Now, customer value. Now, how do you basically assess the value of a particular customer? So, customer assessment of utility of product. It is based on the perception of what basically you provide versus what the customer thinks he has got. So that's the kind of trend that we try to measure. Then basically there are social, emotional, functional, epistemic needs, and then there are condition. Now, the CRM, which is basically the customer relationship management, we talk about the analytical capabilities, the operational capabilities, and then the directional capabilities. And that is where your electronic customer relationship management comes into picture, because the CRM itself has changed a lot ever since technology has taken full drive over there. So ideally what you try to do is you try to create a web interface. You go on and try to connect with your particular customers more regularly, but there is always a risk. The reason is you're directly not connected to your customers. You basically sit behind a wall ideally, and there's no physical connect with the customer. So you do have to ensure that basically there is always a regular connect. There is a feedback process which comes into picture all the time, so that there is some amount of emotional connect between you and the customer, and that's where you are able to gather some feedback and then take account into what exactly you need to work upon. Now, basically, there are four stages ideally to the CRM. First one is the customer value segmentation and selection. So basically, you try to segment your customer. You try to understand. That is where we talked about the 20-80% rule. 80% of the profitability comes from the 20% of the customer. So you try to segment them. You try to understand the value of each and every customer. Then you understand customer attraction. How do you basically attract the customer? What needs to be done in order to attract the customer? These are all about new customers. Then comes into picture the customer retention, because it's very important that once you have established a customer, you need to retain it. We all have seen with example and statistics that it is much easier to retain a customer than to go ahead and try to find a new customer. But then still, we do a lot of work in trying to get a new customer rather than trying to fulfill the opportunities that an existing customer builds. So that's one very key aspect that we need to focus about. The last one is ideally the customer expansion. How do you expand your customer base? So these are the four key stages of a customer relationship management. Ideally, when we talk about all of this, the quality, which is very important, comes into picture. So customer service, when we talk about the customer service and then we try to understand how is the quality of the product, there are 10 determinants of quality that basically come into picture. So we basically do a gap analysis of model, the service, and the quality that comes into picture. And then there is basically 5 gaps that we identify. 4 is on the side of the marketer, and then 1 is on the side of the customer. So we go to serve quality, serve QL, kind of measuring this particular aspect of the gap analysis. Now, customer relationship, we do understand there are 4 types of loyalty when it comes to determining your customer, and how do you then take into account services, marketing, and management. That is very key aspect of it. So that's all about the marketing and the customer relationship management that we discussed till now. We are going to go ahead and then talk about the strategic management for innovative business. So 21st century landscape has changed a lot, because then there is a huge amount of competition, and then there's globalization, there are technical developments which basically make a lot of difference to the strategic management that you do, the kind of strategies that you devise, the kind of innovations that you drive, and that changes a lot of your business capabilities. Now, strategic management, when we talk about this, there are basically 2 models that we ideally take into account. One is the industrial organization model, and this is basically the older of the models that we are going to talk about. The industrial organization model basically takes into account that external opportunities dictate the strategies that firms adopt in order to succeed. So here the whole idea is that your opportunities or your strategies are governed by external environment rather than what is happening within your company. um, it talks about how competing firms, they have similar strategies, how competing firms, they have similar kind of resources. And one of the key aspects that comes into picture again over here is that the decision making over here is very rational. So all the leaders over there, they basically think in terms of the company, they think in terms of profitability. That's the key aspect of decision making over there, rather than trying to get into emotional lead of your employees. So that is where the industrial organization model is all about. Uh, the technical and the technological changes that have come into picture, they do a lot of difference today in terms of strategic thinking. The reason is, as the technology advances and then we have the B2B kind of customers or the B2C kind of customers, we do understand that there is a hyper competition, and you have to cater to those kind of needs. So business to business or business to customer, you have to take into account those kind of situations. uh, the 5 force model that we are going to talk about over here in terms of the IO model is, what is the power of the buyers, the power of the suppliers, what is the rivalry in terms of the competition that you have over there. Then you have the threat of the substitutes, and finally the threat of the new entrants. So these are the kind of aspects that you have to take into account when you talk about the IO model. And then finally comes into picture the resource-based model. So the resource-based models is quite different from what we have talked about in terms of the IO model, the industrial organization model, and the resource-based model kindly ideally takes into account that your growth opportunities are driven by internal customers. And when we say internal customers, basically means your resources. So basically, the firms which take into account the resource-based model, they focus on their internal strength in order to drive growth opportunities or any kind of strategic decision making, because that is where your growth opportunities come from. Now, There are five steps for a superior growth. You have to take into account the resources, you have to take into account the capabilities, you have to take into account the competition advantage that you have, what is the kind of attractive industry that you need to get into, and then finally you have to formalize the strategy that is going to drive growth. Now, for a resource-based model, in order to get a kind of advantage, the competitive advantage over there, you have to ensure that your resources are valuable, they are rare, they are costly to imitate. So it's not very easy to imitate these kind of resources, and then they are not substitutable. So they should not be is substituted by somebody else, because as we talked about in the resource-based model, so ideally your growth opportunities arise from internal customers, which basically are your resources. And that is where here the strategic leadership or the role of the CEO comes into picture. The CEO has to take into account that the internal stakeholders, the employees, the customers, and then the communities which you cater to, they all are taken into account when you devise your strategies. So that's where the resource based model is different from the IO model that we have talked in the past. And it's very important in that case that you have a proper strategy in terms of growth. You have a cost leadership strategy, or you could have a differentiation strategy, you would have a focus strategy, or a value innovation. So all these are the kind of different strategies that you can have in terms of driving growth opportunities. Now, when we talk about opportunities in terms of growth, we also talk about the challenges in terms of change. So it's always difficult to accept change or to drive a particular change. And that's where it's very important that we try to understand what are the kind of challenges that you face when you try to make a change. The changes could be evolution versus revolution. So evolution is where you slowly evolve, you try to establish yourself as an organization, you change the models and the kind of needs that you have. Revolution is where you make a sudden change when you understand that there's something inevitable, you have to make very quick changes. That's where revolution comes into picture. Now your changes could again be slow versus fast. Either you have a very slow change, adaptability is a problem, or you could have a change which is very drastic, happens very quickly. Another aspect of a change could be a creative destruction versus reconfiguration that we talk about in terms of changes. So it could be again either reconfiguring, or you want to creatively adapt to a new strategy altogether. Another one is the intermittent versus the continuous. Intermittent is where you very suddenly make some very quick changes over there, rather than having a continuous process of evolution. And then there is a focus versus balance change. Focus is where you basically take into account one particular aspect and you focus on that kind of a change to ensure that it drives benefit. Now, balance change is where you make a kind of strategy and then you follow that. So that's the whole and soul about strategic management that we want to discuss about. We'll finally go ahead and try to talk about entrepreneurship, uh, since the the industry has become very consumer oriented, and then there's a lot of scope in terms of technology which has come into picture. Entrepreneurship is another aspect which makes a lot of difference. Um, when we talk about entrepreneurship, the first thing that comes into mind is how do you create an innovative economic organization? And then you should have a network of organization for the purpose of greater good. That is the whole idea when you talk about entrepreneurship. Now, a new enterprise, when you try to establish a new enterprise, what are the kind of aspects that you have to take into account, or the kind of things that come into picture? And it's basically a new enterprise determines in terms of either a product or a service. It has to figure out a market, a mechanism for bringing the product and the market together, because that's very key aspect of entrepreneurship. And then what are the management elements for all these three aspects that we mentioned. Now, entrepreneurship has its own elements, and there are three key elements that we can talk about: the creativity and the innovation. How basically you innovate, you kind of create new ideas, and that is how your entrepreneurship. You could be a good entrepreneur and drive a new service or a product. the kind of economic organization that you have around yourself, that again drives what kind of entrepreneurship or new enterprise can come into picture. The kind of risk and uncertainty that you face, that is again one very key aspect of determining if you would be able to kind of set up a new enterprise. Now, entrepreneurship and economic freedom, they are very keenly related, and it's very important that there is economic freedom in for any kind of entrepreneurship, any kind of new enterprise to flourish. Now, new venture creation could be individual characteristics. They need a good environment. They need, then you try to understand what the kind of constraints in the environment which basically stop a new venture creation, and then the organization itself, which is going to determine what kind of entrepreneurship is going to come into picture. So these are some of the very key aspects of an entrepreneurship that we wanted to discuss today, of how exactly are the kind of new venture opportunities that come into picture, and they have changed drastically. If you see, the entrepreneurship is not a very new phenomenon, it's been there for quite some time. How exactly it happened in the ages during in Rome, and then finally in China, there were different aspects of how basically entrepreneurship comes into picture over there, and then finally it has evolved over a period of time, and now we have a different aspect of it altogether. So these are the three modules that we want to talk about. The Swami signing off, and thank you for listening to this. We'll meet again. Thank you. Bye bye.